Ever find it annoying when a story begins with a quote that may or may not be connected with what you're about to read? That literary device is called an epigraph, and it's meant to set the tone for the story. The saga I'll be covering today is rife with epigraphs, perhaps more than it should have. But if there's one that you should remember, it's "The snow falls, each flake in its appropriate place." This quote significantly informs the story, both within and beyond the panels. Today we dive into the nearly 3-decade-long saga of the Forever War. To fully grasp the saga, there are a few essential things you should know. The Archie universe branched off from the Fred Wolf cartoon after the comic adaptation of The Incredible Shrinking Turtles, when Archie Comics decided to publish brand new stories. We would later learn that Armagon took Shredder into the future in that story. Shredder must have returned at some point because, along with Krang, he soon began pursuing the Turnstone, a powerful device capable of making any thought a reality. In their final conflict over the Turnstone, Cherubay intervened, separating the villains and imprisoning Shredder on Earth. However, Shredder mysteriously escaped and released a giant foot super soldier in Chinatown, ultimately defeated with the help of Chu-Chi, the warrior dragon. Following this conflict, the Turtles rescued Oroku Saki, separating him from a power-hungry Krang. On an adventure in Japan, Raphael met and started dating Umiko, also known as Ninjara, who then joined the Turtles in all their subsequent stories. During the Future Shark saga, the Turtles encountered their future selves, who needed help against Armagon, Shredder, and Verminator X. This version of Shredder had just been taken moments after the Incredible Shrinking Turtles, because he possessed one of the Sarnath's eyes, needed to activate Donatello's future invention, the Time Slip Generator, a time machine. The Turtles then met Sarnath, who was searching for his 2 missing eyes, and helped save the universe by merging himself with the Turnstone. In the Animus War, the Turtles allied with Golani, a superpowered Israeli woman, to avert the end of times, a story for another time. During the Dreamland saga, the future Turtles traveled back to World War II to battle Hitler's brain, but lost the time slip remote in the past. Finally, in the Moon Eyes saga, Ninjara ended her relationship with Raphael. Behind the panels, our story picks up in 1995, just after the Moon Eyes saga concluded. An advertisement in that final issue teased the next saga, the Forever War, intended as a series finale. However, discontent was brewing at Archie Comics. Displeased with recent storylines involving Hitler's brain, a dystopian future, and Raphael's breakup with Ninjara, editor-in-chief Victor Gorelick and publisher Michael Silbercleat questioned writer Steve Murphy about his plans for the next arc. Upon discovering it involved the Turtles battling a darker version of Shredder in the future, they decided it was time for Murphy to leave the series. Murphy suspected Archie Comics had several reasons for ending his tenure early. The company was pivoting to direct market sales, aiming for comic shops as their issues lost traction on newsstands. Ironically, they sought a more child-friendly tone to attract an audience predominantly composed of teenagers and adults. Concerns were also growing over Mirage's entry into the color comic scene with the release of TMNT Volume 2 in the direct market. Feeling unwelcome, Murphy resigned, leaving him without a role at Mirage Comics as licensing opportunities dwindled in 1995. Murphy wouldn't return to the Turtles franchise until 2001. Meanwhile, the Archie series concluded with 2 additional issues that explained the origins of the Turtles' weapons. Following the series cancellation, a 3-issue miniseries titled The Year of the Turtle attempted to capture a mainstream audience. Despite hopes to continue the series, poor sales led to its termination. Yet, the advertisement for the Forever War depicting Shredder victorious over a lifeless future Donatello has intrigued fans ever since. Years later, while working on Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Steve Murphy reunited with Chris Allen, the original artist for the Forever War. Inspired, they explored reviving the saga under Mirage as a standalone black and white book. By 2007, Murphy had met with TMNT co-creator Peter Laird and Mirage Studios CEO Gary Richardson to discuss releasing the saga as a special project for the Turtles' 25th anniversary in 2009. They planned to excite fans with future tense, a trade paperback that would collect the Future Shark trilogy and Dreamland storylines. Despite their enthusiasm, challenges arose. Only one full issue had been penciled in 1995, with layouts for a second chapter and covers completed. But Murphy couldn't recall the story's direction and had kept no synopses. Opting to start afresh, he released new concept art by Chris Allen, featuring 5 interconnected covers, hinting at possible plot points, though the full script remained unfinished. In December 2007, Murphy made the original 6 pages penciled in 1995 public on his blog, along with all the cover layouts. As 2009 approached, the saga was condensed to 3 chapters, but only an issue-by-issue synopsis was ready. Unfortunately, the book's lateness would prove its demise. Viacom acquired the franchise that year, and with The Forever War not yet in production, the project was shelved. Murphy and Allen still hoped to publish the book under a new license, which would soon be IDW Publishing. The Forever War remained a non-disclosure agreement for 18 months post-buyout. During this period, IDW also secured the rights for the Archie Comics collected books. However, after 18 months, IDW showed no interest in completing the saga. After the Forever War was cancelled twice, fans began devising a potential conclusion similar to their efforts with the also cancelled Image Comics run. Andrew Modine, the writer of another fan project, hesitated to undertake a fan-made Forever War without a detailed synopsis from Steve Murphy, enabling him to mimic the original narrative voice, ideally with Murphy's direct feedback. This approach mirrored his previous collaboration with writer Gary Carlson. Lacking this, Modine felt he could only offer a wrap-up story for the Archie universe. By 2014, Modine's Russian collaborator, Arseniy Dubakov, contacted Chris Allen about designing new covers for the Russian reprints of TMNT Adventures. Allen agreed, and during their meeting, Arseniy proposed finishing the Forever War. Searching for all existing materials, they discovered synopses for the saga were missing, leaving them only with pencils and some dialogue for issue 73, 80% of pencils for issue 74, and the covers for issues 75 to 77. With all that existed on their hands, they brought in Andrew Modine to finish the scripts, based on a plot by Arseniy, Artem Tsarkov, and Yegor Prudov. Andrew would end up writing new dialogue for pages 11 to 21 of the first issue and pages 1 to 19 of the second one. Andrew asked Steve, since this saga was promised as a wrap-up of the series, if Mr. Null was in it, and the answer was no. It would turn out that the saga wouldn't resolve every open storyline, a decision probably for the best. Eager to deliver as much of the original intent to fans, the team preserved every piece of dialogue and material available. With Murphy's endorsement, they launched a crowdfunding campaign aimed for a June 2020 release. Opting against platforms like Indiegogo or Kickstarter to avoid fees, Arseniy managed the funding directly, ensuring all proceeds went towards paying artists, printing, extras, and shipping. Steve Murphy initially promised to help with revisions, but ultimately decided he didn't want to return to the Turtles and wished the creative team good luck with the project. Progress was promising by the end of 2019, with a digital version of the first chapter released to backers. However, delays hindered the project, and by the end of 2020, with only 3 issues penciled, Arseniy started printing limited ashcan editions of the existing chapters to cover costs and deliver a version of the chapters as they were finished. There wouldn't be a Chapter 4 until February 2021. For the fans, the Forever War would take, well, forever to be finished. Being a side project for everyone involved meant that the final chapter would be long in the making. But fate wasn't done playing with the Forever War. Things would happen that would bring everything to an administrative standstill.
The Russian president says a military operation is now underway in eastern Ukraine.
Full-scale invasion that intelligence officials had been warning about for weeks is now underway, and there are reports of explosions and attacks at several major Ukrainian cities.
The European Union and its partners are working to cripple Putin's ability to finance his war machine.
The project persisted, but with all financial transactions to Russia blocked, funding was frozen until Arseniy could find an alternative to eBay and PayPal. By July 2022, Chris Allen had completed the last chapter. Around the same time, Ken Mitroni almost joined the project to contribute a backup story. More on that later in this video. A year later, Jim Lawson finished the backup pages and pre-orders resumed. The book went to the printers in January 2024, marking the deadline for sponsors to be included. After some layout corrections, the books were set to be ready by the end of February, shipping out by the end of March, with most backers receiving their copies in April 2024. However, due to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, backers in Australia and New Zealand faced challenges receiving their mail from Russia, prompting some, like the writer of this script, to route their shipments through the UK. Despite its status as a fan project, the quality of the Forever War, like everything produced by Turtles Club, is exceptionally high, making it a collector's treasure. It was released in various formats, including full-color issues, a limited run of black and white ash cans, a standard softcover, an oversized hardcover, and a limited edition hardcover featuring 19 postcards with artwork by Chris Allen and an acrylic figure stand. The content remained consistent across all editions, differing only in cover art, extras, and format. As of this writing, copies of the Forever War are still available, but they might soon be sold out. You can contact Arseniy directly to secure a copy, and I'll include more details in the description. So, have I missed anything? Oh yes, let's delve into the story of the Forever War. As previously mentioned, the story opens with a paraphrased version of the Zenkai Shibayama quote, with Splinter comparing his sons to snowflakes that always find their rightful place. In this case, the Turtles were back from their adventure in Alaska, where Raphael broke up with Ninjara. To match his mood, he started wearing his black wrestling costume again. After a training session, the Turtles and Splinter were preparing to patrol, but a sudden time-slip portal appeared, delaying them. Expecting their future selves to emerge, they were surprised when no one appeared. Driven by courage, Leonardo led them through the portal to investigate. On the other side, they found a dying Donatello, who revealed in his final words that he had been attacked by the Shredder, who had stolen the time-slip generator schematics. The impact of future Donnie's death was profound, but the urgency increased when they discovered the Shredder had left a time bomb, likely to prevent them from following him. Upon returning to their own time, they found the timeline altered. Shredder had triumphed and become a tyrant. In this Orwellian new world, the Turtles were being watched not only by the Shredder, but also by a group of insurgents: Umeko, Galani, Carter, and Claire. Umeko, also known as Ninjara, and Galani have been mentioned, but let's talk about the two new characters. Carter is an adaptation of the Fred Wolf cartoon character of the same name, who debuted around the time this issue was supposed to come out. However, there was no information about this character in the few pages with text they had, so Carter was named by the creative team of the project. Still, these pages were available for a long time, and his physical similarity with Miles, one of Leo's future students, made fans think it could have been him. But the timeline wouldn't work for a character like Miles, who was from the future. This version of Carter also has an accent. I can't be sure without hearing it, but he sounds British. Claire was a mysterious new character with an eye patch and super strong metallic hands. I'll talk more about her later. But just like Carter, she was named by Arseniy, Artem, and Yegor. So how did this new reality come to be? It all began after the Future Shark trilogy, when Shredder found himself stranded in the future. With Armagon gone and Verminator X technically lobotomized, he had to find a way to go back in time and power up a time-slip generator. Looking for powerful relics to use, he discovered a time-slip remote among forgotten World War II relics in a German warehouse, a device the Turtles had lost in the past. Having learned the date of the Turtles' transformation, more on how that happened later, he jumped into Donnie's lab, gave him a fatal wound, and took the schematics to the past. On the day the Turtles were destined to fall into the sewer, Shredder intercepted them, persuading Chet, the boy who purchased them, to sell them for $200. Chet accepted, and Shredder warned him to stay away from the sewers, as there was an alligator there eating little boys. Counting the minutes on the time bomb he left behind, Shredder jumped ahead in time to the moment he threw the mutagen that would transform the Turtles and Yoshi. He knocked him unconscious and took him prisoner. Afterwards, he located Yoshi and killed him. Foreseeing the failure of his alliance with Krang, Shredder returned to the Technodrome, eliminated Krang, and seized control of the technological empire, thus enabling him to dominate the world. Upon revealing his identity, he placed humanity under the Foot Confederation's protection. Leveraging technological advancements, Shredder began mutating civilians, creating an army of mutants. However, not all experiments were successful, and the rejected mutants eventually formed an insurgence against the Foot Confederation. There's a pitch for a Saturday morning cartoon right there. When Sarnath arrived on Earth seeking his 2 missing eyes, Shredder seized the last one and turned Sarnath into his minion. With the aid of Manx, also known as Verminator X, and the Eye of Sarnath, Shredder successfully constructed his time-sub generator using the future schematics.
Well, now that we've gotten all the exposition out of the way, what do we do next?
Returning to the alternate present, Turtles watched April on the news, reporting on the capture of Kid Terra and the assassination of Chu Shi, the Dragon Warrior and face of the Chinatown insurgency. They visited her after the broadcast, but their appearance frightened her enough to ask for Foot super soldiers' help. Tragically, April was killed in the ensuing battle by one of the large robots. When the situation seemed dire, the 4 insurgents arrived and helped the Turtles and Splinter escape from a giant Foot super soldier. At this point, one might argue that the Turtles could easily be eliminated by killing their unmutated selves, a thought that Shredder also considered. After noticing that killing the pet turtles didn't erase the mutated ones out of existence, he decided to finally kill his younger self. This reveals a lack of consideration for the consequences of time paradoxes. If Shredder feared that killing his younger self might erase him from existence, shouldn't he also consider that altering the timeline that allowed him to access a time machine could have the same effect? It's food for thought. We also learned about the other minions of the Shredder, like Tattoo and the Mighty Mutanimals. Shredder deployed his Crimson Circle to attack the Turtles at their insurgency base and tasked the Mighty Mutanimals with protecting the time-slip generator. The insurgency's base was hidden beneath Shredder's Island, formerly known as Liberty Island. Some anthropomorphic animals like Chameleon, Kathmandu, Alfalfa, and Bookworm worked there. As far as I know, only Chameleon was a mutant. For Raphael, standing next to an alternate version of Ninjara was hard to deal with, especially as she didn't appreciate being called anything but Umiko. Although she initially doubted their story of coming from the future, the detailed knowledge they possessed convinced Bookworm of their truthfulness. This revelation confirmed their suspicions about Shredder's ultimate weapon, a time machine he was using to teleport his troops. Unfortunately, Shredder was aware of their location and launched an attack with Sarnath, Worm, Scumbug, and numerous super soldiers, nearly defeating them all. The Turtles, Splinter, Umiko, and a dying Claire managed to escape and found refuge within the Rat King's territory, who was also part of the insurgency. While the rats deterred most of the foot soldiers, it was Claire's final metallic punch that killed Sarnath. The gloomy atmosphere took a big turn when the Rat King recognized the 4 turtles as the pets he almost had. Yes, the Rat King was Chet. He recounted how Shredder's tale of an alligator in the sewers hadn't deterred him as a child. Upon returning to verify the story, he saw Shredder incapacitate his younger self. During the altercation, mutagen splashed onto his skin, granting him a telepathic connection with the rats and leading him to assume a paternal, kingly role among them. It would later be revealed that this wasn't unique to this timeline. After the end of the Future Shark trilogy, the Rat King revealed to the Shredder that he used to own the turtles as pets, and that was how Saki found out which day to go back in the past and stop the turtles from mutating. It turned out that there was great power in knowing where the snowflakes would land after all. Armed with this knowledge and the fact that they were mutated on June 7th, a day after Chet's birthday, the Turtles and Umiko devised a new plan. They would use the Technodrome to create a significant distraction, allowing them and Splinter enough time to travel back and restore their original timeline before destroying the time machine. Thanks to the distraction caused by the Technodrome attack, the Turtles and Splinter reached the time-slip generator. However, as mentioned earlier, the mutanimals were tasked with guarding it, resulting in a fight and a very out-of-place Puerto Rico joke. The Shredder faced both Umeko and the Rat King, proving he was more skilled than both in a fight. He killed Chet, but got outsmarted once again by Umeko, who still had particular skills when it came to stealing. In this case, she stole the remote from him, but this was only an attempt to delay the Shredder. After fighting the mutanimals and accidentally killing Mondo Gecko, the Turtles and Splinter returned to the past and destroyed the generator. Umeko's sacrifice was enough to keep Shredder stuck in this branch timeline. Back in the original timeline, the Turtles intercepted the Shredder right after he knocked himself out, and the fight extended to the surface, where they also had to protect the baby turtles from being crushed by cars. It was also made evident that this Shredder wasn't the same who was sent to prison by Cherubay. More on that later. Mikey stole the schematics back from the Shredder, who attempted to use the time slip once again. But despite the original machine not existing anymore, the portal opened for him, and it dissolved him, apparently being killed in the process. With little time to spare, Splinter and the Turtles threw the pet turtles and the mutagen down the drain to restore their timeline. In a way, this made the Turtles feel that their origin wasn't so random after all. Reflecting on the snowflake metaphor, it seemed the Turtles were always meant to undertake this time-traveling journey. As for the younger Shredder, he woke up, found Yoshi with the pet turtles, and in the middle of his confusion, returned to the Technodrome. More on that later. Finding themselves stranded in the past, the Turtles headed to the future Turtle Co. building to leave a message for the future Don, along with the schematics for the time slip generator. Almost immediately, a portal opened and Donnie rescued them. But what became of the older Shredder? Well, he rematerialized at the spin-off point between the 1987 and Archie universes, right after the Incredible Shrinking Turtles. This happened after Armagon left with the Shredder into the future, so it seemed Fate also had plans to put him back in his place. Completely amnesiac, he talked with Krang, who promised to send Bebop and Rocksteady back to him and commanded him to create a new headquarters in the sewers, explaining the status quo of TMNT Adventures number 5. This story includes 2 backup tales, the first titled Shredded Time. In this story, Mr. Null visits Shredder in prison and restores all his lost memories, attempting to clarify the complex time paradoxes in the Archie timeline. After the events of the Incredible Shrinking Turtles, Shredder fled with Armagon into the future. There, he collaborated with Verminator X and Armagon to steal the time slip generator from the Turtles. Shredder aimed to alter the past using the device, but instead of returning to the Fred Wolf universe, he landed in the new Archie universe right after the decisive battle for the Turnstone. Lacking a Technodrome, Shredder stumbled upon an abandoned Foot Clan headquarters. When the Turtles returned to New York, he unleashed a giant super soldier in Chinatown, which the Dragon Warrior ultimately thwarted. Following this, Krang returned to Earth, possessing Saki's body until the Turtles intervened, rescuing Saki, who was now indebted to them. Armagon later enlisted Shredder and Verminator X to travel back in time to steal the white and black stones of Mecha. Although they only partially succeeded, Shredder chose not to kill Splinter as a gesture of reciprocity. The trio, along with the Rat King, faced defeat in the Future Shark trilogy. It was then that Shredder discovered the Turtles were the pets the Rat King had lost, learning precisely when and where to travel to alter his destiny. This idea would later inspire Noel in the fan-made project TMNT Odyssey. The events of the Forever War happened next, right after Shredder found the lost time slip remote in Germany. Upon being sent back to the point he was taken from, he reaffirmed his alliance with Krang and established their underground base previously used in the Chinatown attack. Shredder would then end up in Hirabelle, where Cherubay would use the Turnstone to send him to an Earth's prison. Since Noel was interested in finding out what happened to the Turnstone, he stopped there, as Shredder was sent away before the fate of the stone was decided. With his memories restored, Shredder vowed vengeance against the Turtles. And is that winged creature in the sky Wingnut? The second backup story, titled Locket, delves into the enigma surrounding Claire. In her final moments, Claire entrusted Splinter with a locket, imploring him to find the sister she had lost years earlier. Inside the locket, they discovered a photograph of Claire's sister, which April recognized. She had the same picture but without Claire, which made sense because she never had a sister. This revelation raises questions about the disparities between the two timelines, particularly regarding April's family history. What could explain these differences? Share your theories in the comments below. Returning to the quote that opened this video, fate is a recurring theme in Murphy's stories. I believe the writers effectively interpreted this concept within the narrative they aimed to craft. Ironically, fate also seemed to play a role in reality, as Arseniy, Andrew, Chris, Artem, and Yegor all found themselves precisely where they needed to be to complete this story. Of course, none of it would have been possible without Steve Murphy's original ideas, even if he couldn't remember what the original plan was. However, many other artistic decisions had to be made by the new team, or more specifically, Artem. For example, the Rat King's identity was inspired by a couple of coincidences. One was that they found the Rat King in the original covers to be similar to Chet. Another one was a typo in the Archie Mutant Universe sourcebook that erroneously listed the Rat King's first appearance as issue 1 instead of 11. The idea that perhaps this was an intentional mistake inspired the new origin. They also explained that Rat King was named Hantan by the rats, as the rats were probably inspired by the Hantan River in South Korea. One thing I found out of place when considering the Archie publishing guidelines was the graphic violence in the saga. If you remember, Archie's editors would go to extremes to not show red blood in the book. It turns out that this was Chris's idea. Nothing in the writing suggested graphic violence taking place within the panels. The Forever War was promoted as the saga closing all the open-ended plots of the Archie adventures. This was a promise I'm happy they didn't deliver on. Addressing every unresolved plot would have overly complicated the story. The story plays a lot with changing history. Manx, for example, a key character from the future, made his earliest appearance in this saga, implying that he was already born in the present and he kept himself immortal thanks to science. Overall, I think the final result is pretty good, and I'm more than happy with the quality. I have a few pet peeves with the writing at certain points, but the plot itself works. Paired with the amazing art, I think this works well as the actual Forever War saga that we never got. It's also worth mentioning that writing time-traveling stories is a double-edged sword. It is very easy to mess it up, and this particular story kept itself grounded in the characters, not letting time paradoxes and plot complications overpower the whole saga, which is a huge win. I have a small problem with how the story was integrated into the same continuity as TMNT Odyssey. Lately, it's been a tradition to link every single fan-made project with Odyssey. I don't see a reason not to do this, but since Odyssey is my least favorite of these stories, I wish they'd break free from it. The good news is that the link to Odyssey in this book is not so obvious, and it takes place in a backup story. So, is this project worthy of being considered canon? I believe it could be published as is, should IDW choose to do so. Given the extensive time it took to complete, I doubt Chris Allen would want to spend more time revisiting the same plot. However, I'm sure some readers would be left thinking about what Murphy's original ending could have been, and in theory, an official conclusion could still happen. But until that happens, it wouldn't be crazy for people to think this is the only version we'll ever get. Recently, Arseniy started working with Gary Fields, who is the original letterer of the Archie Adventures. While doing so, he found out that Gary had the original penciled and lettered pages, including the original missing dialogues of issue 73. It's just a matter of time until those pages become public and restart fan speculations again about the original version of this story. To keep things tidy in this channel, I won't consider this saga as 100% part of the canon for the Archie universe. However, I may still include it in other videos as a possible continuation of the topic of that video.
Last week, Turtles Club announced their follow-up project to The Forever War, issues 78 and 79, presenting a new story, How It All Began, with covers by Dan Berger. The 2 issues will contain 5 stories by legendary artists of the series, Jim Lawson, Chris Allen, Ken Matroni, Brian Thomas, and Gary Fields. It will introduce origins for April, Cuddly, and the Rat King, and publish 2 forgotten stories. Just like they did with this saga, the book will come out as ash cans, single issues, softcover, and hardcover. The collected editions will contain 40 extra pages with illustrations Chris made for the Russian reprints. Unlike this saga, the book can be pre-ordered now and will be shipping before the year ends. Fingers crossed. So what are your thoughts on the Forever War we've got? Are you eager to support more stories set in the Archie universe? Drop your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Thanks for watching, see you in the sewers.